Thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Jenner. I'm a partnerships lead at Devex, and I'm delighted to be here at the Devex at WHA 76 programming. Today, I am joined by Yves Dubaquie, who's the Senior Vice President of Diagnostics at Revvity, and Farid Fezoua, who's the Global Director of Health and Education from the International Finance Corporation. Thank you both so much for joining us today, and a warm welcome and a big thanks to Revvity for being our innovation partner. Now, many of our audience might have known Revvity as PerkinElmer and may be familiar with the work you do producing life science tools, diagnostics, newborn screening, genetic testing, autoimmune and infectious disease testing, and more. So can you tell us what you've learned about the rebrand so far and how it better positions you to meet the evolving needs of clinical laboratories and healthcare professionals?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So first of all, the name Revvity is really meant to represent our commitment to revolutionizing next generation breakthroughs that improve lives. And our purpose is really to expand the boundaries of human potential through science. And we do that by being a visionary partner, developing technologies and solutions to help solve the world's greatest challenges. But, the change in brand is not just a change in name or logo, it actually goes deeper than that. It is part of a corporate strategy to focus exclusively on life sciences and diagnostics. After we divested our analytical and enterprise solutions business. And it's this focus on diagnostics and life sciences that helps us combine our innovative science with our know-how in developing, clinical diagnostic tests. So that's really, what's behind that new rebranding as well.
That's great to hear. And Farid, the pandemic made clear the weakness in health systems, especially in low and middle income countries. What were the most urgent needs during COVID-19 from your perspective, and how did the IFC address these?
So thanks, Jessica, and thanks for having us on this panel. And I'm glad to be sharing the floor with Yves. That's the critical question. And if there is probably one word or lesson that we took out of COVID is the strengthening of the health system in low and medium income countries. So when the COVID pandemic hit, we saw many health systems in these low and middle income countries, and across Africa, some part of Asia, Latin America, really struggling. First, with getting simple supply of basic equipment, PPE equipment, masks, gloves, you remember all that. I think we all followed all that, but also advanced medical technologies. The next step was ventilators. And I can tell you, I was sitting and living in Africa at that time, and getting ventilators was just impossible, to keep people alive. And then, when the vaccine came up, we had huge issues of just figuring out the supply chain and the delivery of vaccine through the low and medium income countries. And even the last mile immunization has been a problem. So just taking these lessons, IFC was immediately, and the World Bank Group as a whole, was immediately mobilized to solve for the immediate needs, solving the supplies. And we created at the time, in July 2020, a global health platform with a total amount of $4 billion to be deployed to start strengthening this health system. It started with immediately enabling the private sector to be able to produce more of these critical equipment and drugs that were needed and distribute them. So looking at the whole ecosystem from manufacturing to supply chain. And then we look at vaccines. Post-pandemic, vaccine was still a problem. And we kind of made a priority on vaccine localization. So the other key word was localization. And it's both localization of production of critical drugs, vaccines, equipment, but it also localization of the capacity and capabilities to deliver the right services. So we kind of today, pivoted and kind of shifted the global health platform into a platform that would fund in developing capabilities from the private sector, because IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank, but to localize and invest in developing these capabilities. So today, the good news is that if you just look at a continent, and I'm taking Africa because still today, 99% of vaccines are imported in a continent that counts 1.2 billion people, that will count 2.4 billion in 2050. And there is only little, production. So we're very glad to support the efforts of what I would call the champions that are emerging, whether it's Institut Pasteur de Dakar in Senegal, whether it's BioVac in South Africa, what Rwanda is doing with BioNTech in Rwanda, is really the things we're currently funding for more sustainability in the future.
Great, thank you so much for the insights there. Yves, I'm curious to know, in what ways did Revvity address the pandemic in terms of unprecedented demands on clinical diagnostic laboratories worldwide?
Yeah, thank you. So, we really delivered critical support in three main areas during the COVID pandemic. It was delivering diagnostic tests, so product, automation, and also finally delivering clinical testing services. So since the earliest days when the COVID pandemic started, we worked collaboratively, our teams worked collaboratively across continents to deliver a PCR test within 2 weeks, which later by the FDA was deemed to be one of the most sensitive PCR tests on the market. But in addition, we also developed serological assays as well as antigen tests. And then thanks to our automation expertise, we took this manual PCR test, combined it with our liquid handling into fully automated and high throughput workflow stations that were able to process up to 10,000 samples a day. And then finally, in terms of services, we really set up and ran clinical testing service facilities, 3 of those, 1 in the US and 2 in the UK. So for instance, in the UK, we worked with the NHA's Trace and Track initiative that obviously was critical for the UK government to tackle the COVID pandemic. And then finally, in addition to all of that, you mentioned vaccines and obviously the critical role of vaccines. We contributed to vaccine development by introducing tests that could measure the level of immune response that was elicited by certain vaccines. And obviously that's critical to ensure that these therapies are going to be effective. So all in all, we estimate that we helped test about 75 million individuals that had been infected with the virus, so that they could really isolate and sort of combat and prevent the spread of the disease. So.
And just to expand upon that slightly, would you say that this experience has set you up for success to tackle new or upcoming pandemics?
Yeah, I would say so. We learned obviously a couple of things, right? One is broad viral surveillance is critical, and we've heard a lot about that here. It's obviously critical to allow for detection of potential threats and immediately launch, new health protocols. And then I think the other area that we learned was really that the COVID-19 pandemic and the rise of other infectious diseases, it really puts a spotlight on human immunology. And, understanding how we fight those invaders, our immune system response is really important. It's important to be able to measure that. And, we have obviously some of these technologies, as a matter of fact, we're already using T-cell technologies or T-cell testing in our tuberculosis assay. And as you know, tuberculosis is still the leading killer caused by a single infectious disease agent. And so better access and also widespread use of these, of all tuberculosis tests, for instance, whether they're looking at acute or at latent tuberculosis, is obviously critical. And Revvity will play an important partnership here with everybody.
Thank you. And we touch upon partnerships. Farid, what role can the private sector play in strengthening health systems, and how can the public and private sector better partner together?
Yes, no, that's a key question, and I think Yves touched on some of that. But I would say a few things. First, it's innovation. A lot of the innovation being done in the healthcare space, and Revvity is one of them, but you have plenty of the private sector developing new technologies, new drugs, new vaccines every day. And we've seen during COVID, at the end of the day, the vaccine could be developed so fast thanks to the private sector. Not only a collaboration between the private sector, academia, and the government, but without the private sector, getting to that level of innovation so fast would be a challenge. So let's not forget that. It's critical. And when we think about beyond COVID, and just to stay on the issue of vaccines, we're looking at now innovation still ongoing with malaria vaccine that is upcoming. And when you think about malaria, TB, HIV, just to stay on the areas of communicable disease, this is a huge step forward. And what I'm seeing, and actually with a lot of satisfaction, is that the fact of now having seen the criticality of having this develop in low and medium income countries is opening the door to more innovation in the space of tackling non-communicable disease, being able to localize the production of biopharmaceuticals, and localizing drug substance API in these countries. So we've seen that in some part of the low and medium income countries like India and China in the past. Today it's the turn of Africa that we're developing in that space. So the second piece is health services, the delivery itself. Let's not forget that whatever we produce as equipment, as drugs, if we don't have particularly strong healthcare services system, hospital, diagnostic, primary care, bottom of the pyramid, and I would argue that without the strengthening of primary care, we won't be able to reach that level of solution. So, and the third point is really about the partnership between that private sector and the governments. We want the private sector coordination and cooperation to be part of the national health strategies. And that's within what we do at IFC in enabling through our funding support and advisory type of services support. We also want to be positioning the right cooperation between the private and the public sector. I think the World Bank Group is naturally designed to create that healthy cooperation to deliver, at the end of the day, public good in health.
Absolutely, thank you for that. So in our final minutes, perhaps we can hear a final call to action. What needs to change to ensure that countries are prepared for the next health crisis? Yves, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I think a couple of things, right? Global surveillance models only work if the international health and scientific communities continue to work with the governments and corporations to combat the spread of infectious disease. And I'd say, as it relates to testing specifically, I think this decentralization of testing we've seen has been a critical element because it allows to get better access, so patients have better access to testing, and they can then in turn get much quicker access to treatment as well. And then, I think you made obviously several points already, but I think that also the diagnostic and therapeutic companies, have to collaborate and work in concert. And Revvity, we're really focused on supporting scientists and clinicians in that quest. And finally, I'd say the call to action really for me is supporting countries to strengthening and develop their infrastructure and strengthening their healthcare systems from diagnosis to treatment. And let's collaborate to develop public-private partnerships and enable a healthier population. So that's why we're here.
Thank you. And Farid?
No, from our standpoint is, and I may sound like a broken record, but localization is key. So continue to invest, to support, to enable tech transfer and knowledge transfer to really localize these capabilities in the low and medium income countries. Also emulate and nurture and support innovation. So within IFC, we've got a dedicated disruptive technology. I like what Dr. Shamin said. technology, health tech, AI just augments capacity and capabilities where it's needed the most. So continue to invest in that. We've got a very passionate venture capital and disruptive technology team at IFC, and we invest in very early stage type of tech companies, not necessarily in the Silicon Valley, but in Africa, in Asia, where innovation is also coming from brilliant minds, and we just need to really continue that push to create and nurture this native innovation. The last point, and I agree with Yves, is really the cooperation between the public and the private sector. From an IFC World Bank standpoint, we have mechanism of funding and de-risking these cooperation and whatever we call them, public-private cooperation partnership. But at the end of the day is really to be able to leverage the best of the private sector in cooperation with the public sector to deliver high quality, ethical, and efficient and accessible services and health services.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you both so much for joining us today and adding such an insightful topic to our agenda. Another big thank you to our innovation partner, Revvity. Our partner's support is invaluable to our journalism, and your contribution has played a vital role in making this event so successful. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.